Good evening, everybody. Welcome to another OurWhisky tasting. I'm so pleased to have you all joining us, and I can see so many familiar names coming up in the chat box already. Hello, Alistair, Chris, Pesho, lovely to see you all here. Don't forget, if you are following along with us live, do let us know that you're watching. I'd love to see names coming up in the chat box, and tell us where you're from as well. I hope everyone's had a good month so far, and has everyone enjoyed the whiskies of the last few months? Our last pack was pretty delicious. We had the Glasgow Distillery's 1770 peated alongside the Lakes Whiskey Makers Reserve number 5. Both incredible drams. For that tasting, I was indeed up in Edinburgh in a beautiful hotel room. I am now back home in Brighton on home soil, and it's quite nice to have a bit of relaxation, a bit of enjoying the summer by the sea. How's everyone enjoying the heat wave, by the way? Is everyone coping all right? It's not quite neat cask strength whiskey weather, is it? But I do hope that there are some highballs that have been floating around. Let us know how you've been enjoying the whiskey in the heat wave too. Pesho, yes. So this is actually something that I wanted to bring up. Pesho asks a very good question. Can we get the older packs from previous months? Now, I do have an announcement to make. Very soon, we will be putting up all of the previous whiskies on our website, so you can purchase some of those previous drams, but they are limited. So when they're gone, they're gone. I will be sending an email out to everyone. So if you subscribe with us already, then you'll be getting a notification when those bottles will be live on the website. Of course, then you will be first come, first served to get those bottles. And if you're not subscribed with us yet, do already. What are you waiting for? But I will be putting stuff out on social media as well. You might want to follow our newsletter, so sign up on the website and you'll get all of our information as it drops too. So yeah, there's still plenty of time to catch up, and if you're watching this and haven't subscribed yet, then some of the bottles from this tasting will also be available on the site as well. So without further ado, now you all know, hopefully you've got all your whiskey packs have come through the door. I'm loving, by the way, how all of these are fitting through the letterbox. There's no need to wait in for the courier. It's just popping through and it's just landing on your doorstep. So hopefully when you come home from work, there's a lovely little whiskey surprise waiting for you. So obviously inside, you've got your pack, you've got your 2 tasting note cards, which are included in there, and also your 2 whiskies as well. So this month, this month we'll be going through 2 amazing whiskies. Let me get these out. Michter's US #1 Unblended. I think that's back to front for you guys watching. Do you know what? I hate these cameras. I can never work them out. Michter's US #1 Unblended, and the second one is Benromach 15-year-old, an absolute classic. Both of these are what I would consider modern classic whiskies. Now, when it comes to choosing all these whiskies, I do rely mostly on my own experience of tasting whiskey over many, many years. And Benromach is one of my favourites. Michter's as a distillery is fantastic. I absolutely love the whiskey from this distillery. So I'm really hoping that you'll enjoy these whiskies. John, thank you for telling me it's the right way around. I would be worrying about that forever, so I appreciate that. Thank you. Okay, so obviously both of these whiskies, if you're not familiar with Michter's or Benromach, these are 2 quite unusual whiskies from distilleries that are turning traditions upside down. They're creating something just a little bit different, while also ramping up the flavour to 11. So these are indeed Stranger Things. I am obsessed with the show, so if you didn't get those references, we can't be friends anymore. So we are going to dig into these 2 amazing whiskies, and they're going to be introduced to us by 2 incredible women who really do live and breathe whiskey. They've devoted their entire careers to the profession, both of whom also have whiskey making in their blood as well. So first up, I'd love to introduce to you Susan Colville. Susan Colville, who is brand home manager for Benromach. Hi, Susan.
Hi, good evening, everyone. How are we?
And also joining her is Andrea Wilson, who is Master of Maturation for Michter's in Kentucky. Hi.
Hi, everyone.
So good to have you both on. Susan, tell us a little bit about yourself, because I feel like Benromach is one of those distilleries that we all know. We all know the sight of it. That iconic red chimney is everywhere. We always see Benromach. Tell us a little bit about you, though. What's your background?
Well, I am a Speyside. I grew up in Rothes. My dad worked at Glenrothes Distillery for over 35 years and always told me never to get into the whiskey industry. I clearly don't listen to my parents, because here I am. I did French university with intentions of becoming a French teacher. I started working at Glenfiddich as a tour guide, as you do, to keep my French up over the summer holidays. Got the whiskey bug, and 20 something years later, I'm still in the industry. I've had a variety of different roles, mostly with independent bottlers, export sales, traveled world whiskey festivals, etc., etc. Met my husband, who also works in the whiskey industry. Some of you may know him. His name's Donald. He used to work for Diageo, and in 2013, I joined Gordon and MacPhail as the brand home manager at Benromach Distillery in Forres. So, been about a bit is probably the easiest way to describe that. So, yeah, that's me in a nutshell.
Been about a bit. You also won Visitor Centre Manager of the Year. You're also a keeper of the Quake as well.
Yeah.
And Benromach, you have overseen Benromach to becoming a 5-star visitor attraction in Scotland as well.
Yep.
Which is amazing.
When I joined the company in 2013, we saw just over 6,000 visitors a year. And the last full year we had pre-COVID, we saw 15,000 visitors a year. So we've more than doubled our visitor numbers. We've got a good team. I can't do it all myself. There is a good team around us. We all have a huge pride for Benromach. We've got quite a lot of local Parisians who work with us, and everyone has a real pride and passion for Benromach, and we all just love to spread the word about our beautiful whiskies.
Parisian, is that somebody who's from Forres?
Yes.
Yeah. I love that, Parisian. I'm going to use that from now on. I love it. Thank you so much. It's really lovely to have you part of OurWhisky. Thanks for joining us. And Andrea as well, coming all the way over from Kentucky today, from Michter's. Andrea, how are you?
I'm good. We are also experiencing the heat wave here in Kentucky. Seems like it's everywhere, but good for maturing Kentucky bourbon. So all is well.
Now, you also have a really long history yourself of working in the whiskey industry, starting as getting a master's in chemical engineering. Is that right?
And then that's right. Mm-hmm.
And then you worked with Diageo.
I did. I had a long career with Diageo. I ended up running their North American distilling and maturing business for many years, and then left Diageo and went to a family-owned business, which is Michter's, and have been an incredible part of building a team here and building a huge manufacturing business across 3 different campuses. And so, yeah, it's just been amazing to see this brand grow. And similar to Susan, you don't do it by yourself. We have a really talented team here, and it's so fun to, I don't know, just see the next generation coming up too, in the whiskey business. I think that's part of what really engages me every day. Of course, the whiskey, love all whiskey, but it's just fun to see people coming to the industry and wanting to be a part of it and building a new future. So
definitely, and that's obviously what OurWhisky is all about as well. But speaking of the next generation, I mentioned at the start that both of you have whiskey making in your blood, and Andrew, your grandfather was a moonshiner. Is that right?
Yes, he was. I suspect that there's still some folks like that here in Kentucky and West Virginia and other parts of the country. But so my great uncle worked for Seagram's. My grandfather was a moonshiner here in Kentucky, and he used to tell me that no one would hire him at any of the distilleries because he was a known moonshiner. So they were afraid, I guess, he would steal their secrets or something. I don't know. But anyhow, yeah, I grew up hearing all of these enchanting stories, all completely illegal, of course. But, when you're a child, you're like, oh, this is so fascinating listening to, my grandfather tell these stories. And then ultimately, I grew up in a family. We made beer and wine, nothing commercially, but just, for ourselves and for family and friends. And then kind of got the same thing, got the whiskey bug, and was like, I need to do this. I have to turn my hands. I was a child that made things anyway. I had every chemistry set. I had every rock tumbler, easy bake oven. I had everything. I was always making stuff. And so I just knew I was destined to make whiskey. And so graduated from university, thought I was going to go right into the American whiskey business. And unfortunately, during the 90s, it was not a booming time to be in American whiskey. So couldn't get a job straight away, but was able to work as a consulting engineer for many years, which turned out to be a really great time in my life because I always tell people I got to do everything from cookies to oil. So learned how a lot of things got made, some of which I would like to forget. and so that ultimately led me to Diageo. I did a project for them and ultimately got hired on with them and had many different things I did for them. I did whiskey planning. I oversaw warehouses, worked my way up, and ultimately had a great career with them. And now I'm continuing that passion for whiskey with Michters, and I focus on the wood side of the business. So, we have master distiller, Dan McKee, and then I am his partner working on the aging side of the business. So I do everything from procuring the wood, coming in, overseeing the cooperages, overseeing the natural seasoning processes of the wood, the toasting, the charring, making sure everything's done to our specifications, essentially. A lot of quality control, and then everything that goes into wood selection to cask aging to then ultimately selection for bottling and tasting and filtration, and all of those things all fall into that as well.
Well, I can't wait to hear more about your approach to wood. We've had lots of amazing discussions in the past. Have you ever been out? I've been out to Michter's. I remember fondly meeting you up at Michter's and having a look around the distillery, because you've now got, you've got the 2 distillery sites and also a farm. So I look forward to hearing more about that and also your approach to wood. But I think it's about time we crack open a whiskey. And we're going to start with Benromach to begin with. It was a bit of a toss-up, really, which one we go for, because they're both quite nice, bold styles of whiskey. But let's go for Benromach. And if everyone has their glass to hand, I have my Glencairn. But quite honestly, use whichever glass you like to drink your whiskey from. If it does have a tapered nose to it, then that's always preferable. So if you have maybe a wine glass, it's going to be better than, say, a mug or a pint glass. Please don't drink your whiskey from a pint glass. It's not going to do you any good and it won't taste so great. But if you do have a Glencairn, then grab one of these, or a tumbler would be great as well. And I'll pass over to Susan to introduce the whiskey. So this is the Benromach we'll be tasting first.
For 2 people who work in the whiskey industry and have done for over 20 years each, I could only find one whiskey glass in the house.
One! You should become a journalist, Susan. They send you millions.
So I don't know where they've all gone. During lockdown, we used to use the Glencairns for doing little mini volcano experiments with my daughter. So I think a few of them may have got thrown out at that stage. So the sole whiskey glass that I have, but it's a correct shape, so we're okay. Yes, Benromach. We are tasting the Benromach 15, which is part of our core range. Little bit of background about Benromach if you're not already aware. The distillery was originally built in 1898. It was built by, there we go, the pretty little place there. That's what I call it. It was built in 1898 by Charles Doig, who was a local Elgin man, who is also responsible for the Pagoda ventilator. He also built Dallas Dew, which is on the other side of Forest. The two distilleries were originally built in mirror image of each other. Dallas Dew is now mothballed and is a museum at the moment. Benromach changed hands a number of times over the years, and prior to closing in the 80s, it was owned by Diageo. Unfortunately, it wasn't one of Diageo's big brands. It wasn't one of the classic six. It was predominantly going into blended whiskies. So it was mothballed in 1983. In 1993, Gordon and MacPhail bought the distillery, but they basically just bought the buildings and the water supply. Everything else was stripped out. Anything that was made of metal, the stills were taken out, the mill, the mash tun, everything else was removed. And if it could have been used at any other site, it was. I think the mill is now part of the tour at Oban Distillery, and the mash tun, I believe, went to Royal Lochnagar. So when G&M bought the distillery, they were buying the buildings and the water. We're still using the same water source, which is the Chapelton spring from the other side of the town. And unfortunately, our pipes go underneath the A96, the main road of the Highlands, and goes underneath the railway line as well. So that can be challenging when we need to try and replace our pipes. The decision was then made to try and, we had a clean slate. When you're buying a distillery, if you're buying one that has been previously owned, you usually work with the equipment that you have. But because we had a clean slate, we decided that we had a bit of flexibility on the kind of spirit and the kind of whiskey that we wanted to produce. So with the history of whiskey that Gordon and MacPhail has, over 125 years experience in the whiskey industry, they have the most fantastic liquid library in their head offices. They've got samples of whiskies from the 50s and 60s, and most Speyside whiskies back then were more heavily peated than they are today. Even Glenfiddich's and Glenlivet's, Linkwoods, they were all a little bit smokier than they are now. So we decided that Benromach of Gordon and MacPhail ownership was going to recreate that traditional, slightly smoky Speyside style. And we have worked with local maltsters across Scotland, and we produce our malted barley to between 10 and 12 ppm. So as standard, all of our range is lightly peated, with the exception of the organic whiskey that we produce. It's completely unpeated. So lightly peated, 10 to 12 ppm, all the barley Scottish grown and Scottish malted. We are using exclusively first fill sherry casks and first fill bourbon casks across all of the core range. And we have, as part of the core range, we have the 10, the 15 and the 21. The 10 was the flagship, but we have been finding in recent months that our 15-year-old is proving more popular, and it is our biggest seller. Even in the visitor centre, it is by far it outsells everything else, and I'm not surprised because it's an absolute cracker. I describe it when we do the tours as the 10-year-old turned up to 10. It's rich, it's fruity, it's chocolatey, it's got a little bit of smokiness, it's got a little bit of spiciness, there's a bit of Christmas cake, it's a little bit of apples. I think it just ticks all the boxes for a lightly peated, sherried Speyside single malt. And I'm going to have a wee dram because it's been a while since I've tasted it.
I'll join you with that, Susan. Cheers, Frange. Andrea, I'm afraid you don't have a glass of this Benromach, but
I know I feel quite badly, so I'll just pour some of mine. But now I'm going to have to seek and find the Benromach.
You absolutely will, because this is, it's won multiple awards. The Whiskey Exchange named it its Whiskey of the Year a few years back now.
Back in 2019, yep. And it's won a few awards this year as well. It's like I say, it just ticks all the boxes. It's yummy.
I think
it's not the most technical tasting note, yummy, but it works.
Yummy's a good tasting note. I was also going to say that this is a very smashable whiskey. It's the kind of whiskey that it's a proper session whiskey. It's one you can really
you throw the cork in the fire.
Yeah, exactly. And it's 43% ABV, so it's not particularly high. It's a very good whiskey for people who are relatively new to whiskey, I think, particularly if somebody has a a preconception about smoky whiskies being really pungent and powerful, because this is you're using Highland peat for this as well,
Yes.
aren't you? Which is a very
Yeah,
different style of peat to what Islay uses.
The Highland peat is cut from just outside Tomintoul, so it's a little bit softer, more grassy. If you think of the topography of the land up in the Highlands, it's grassy, it's heathery, it's herbal compared to the coastal salty saline of Islay. So that's going to come across in the smokiness. We do a heavily peated version of our Benromach, which we call peat smoke, and we ask the maltsters to go as heavy on the peat as they can. So it's a batch process, and every batch is different. Our current batch I think is 42 ppm, but we have had 67 ppm, and we get a lot of people coming into the visitor centre who don't like Islay whiskey, and they're like, oh, that's too heavy for me, that's too smoky. But because of the Highland peat, it's a little bit cleaner, a little bit softer, more delicate, and you don't get that same punchiness that you expect from an Islay whiskey with Highland peat. It's toned down a wee bit. It's a wee bit pared back. So
yeah, it's more I'd say the peat is more sort of barbecue bonfire and slightly floral in character, which I think works really well with Benromach's kind of fruity spirit style, but also with the sherry cask maturation as well. How do you get, and Pesha mentions here, the smoke and the fruit balances really well, but how do you get that wonderful balance of smoke and sherry? Because those two elements are really the cornerstones of what makes Benromach so special.
Well, our spirit character is quite fruity. We've got a very long fermentation, and that kind of gives us we've got a long and short fermentation, and the mix of the two gives us a kind of citrusy green apple note in the wash, and it also gives quite a cereally note as well. So the spirit has got that real cereally appley note to it, and the sherry casks, we work with a number of different bodegas in Jerez, and we've been working with them for a number of years. Our distillery manager, Keith, and Stuart Uckert, the director of operations, obviously the pandemic has halted this, but pre-pandemic they'd go out to Jerez every year, and they would work with bodegas to get the best quality casks that we can get. And our first fill policy helps us with that there as well. So it's not exclusively first fill sherry casks. We do have the 15 and the 10 they're a marriage of bourbon and sherry. So it's that balance of that it's predominantly bourbon cask, but that sherry cask influence as well is what's given us that real kind of fruity, round richness that you can get in the 15. It's completely natural colour as well. There's no colour to any of our range. Got a bottle here which might show it slightly better than in the glass. Get the angle wrong. It's been a while since I've done one of these Zoom tastings or online tastings. So completely natural colour, and although it's 43% ABV, it isn't chill filtered as you would expect. There's a light filtration, but it is as minimal as we can get because it's down at the 43%. So
it's really lovely with some beautiful tasting notes that are coming in as well. I love this would pair very well with smoked salmon. I imagine it would very well. John is definitely getting the floral element as well. John, if you're interested in discovering more floral Highland styles of peat, then there are definitely a few more distilleries that you should explore, because Highland peat really is a completely different experience to Islay peat as well. Alistair says, get medicinal notes on the finish with the 10, which put him off, but nothing like that here. And he's trying them side by side. That's interesting. Why would there be more medicinal notes in the 10-year-old than there is in the 15? What would be the reason for that?
I wonder, I mean, not my area of expertise, but I wonder whether the extra aging is having an effect on that smoky character. As peaty whiskies get older, they get softer. So the younger 10 doesn't have that same depth of flavour that the 15 has got from the extra maturation. So I'm wondering whether that medicinal quality is coming through in the younger, because it hasn't had that same length of time in the wood. But I think Andrea's the expert on wood, not me. So.
But I suppose, I mean, yeah, I think you're right. I mean, that peaty element, the smokiness does dissipate over time in cask, obviously. So, what do we give this whiskey then, everyone watching at home? Benromach 15-year-old, is it a thumbs up? I certainly think so. It's for me, it's you know, if it's fast becoming the favourite in the Benromach range, it's won so many awards. It really is a modern classic, but from a distillery that has so much history, a checkered past, really. You know, founded in 1898, built by Charles Doig, who is a legend in the Scotch distilling scene from Victorian era, and really, it was only since Gordon MacPhail reopened the distillery, created Benromach 15, released the 10-year-old, which actually wasn't that long ago, really revived this incredible distillery. And yeah, cheers everyone, because it's such a great whiskey.
And we're not producing huge volumes either. When I started just under 9 years ago, we were 150,000 litres a year. Now in 2022, we're producing 380,000 litres, so it's still not huge volumes. So, but we have steadily increased production, but it's still, everything's still done with a view to making sure that we're keeping that quality the same. We're obviously trying to future-proof to make sure that we've got enough stocks for the future. But yeah, it's still small, completely manual, completely non-automated. There's no computers, no automation. We have 3 stillmen who do all the work by hand on shift patterns. So it's a one-man operation, but still done by sight, sound, and touch.
Are there any plans for expansion to help you make more whiskey?
There will be. There will be. I think the issue that we have at the moment, that any increase in production that we have on a major scale would involve having to input more stills. We have 13 washbacks and 2 stills, 1 wash, 1 spirit. So anything that would be needed to be increased from there, it would involve putting in some new stills. So we're resisting that at the moment. We've got a bit of wiggle room, so we can increase production a wee bit more with the equipment that we have. But if we wanted a major increase, it would mean quite a lot of investment. So
I can imagine. Well, hopefully it wouldn't involve digging up the road either, getting to those pipes.
Yeah,
Susan,
anytime there's the roads getting opened up, we're just like, well, while you're there.
Thank you so much for this. This has been a huge success, home run with the Benromach 15-year-old. Thank you. Lots of love for this whiskey. I think it's about time we move on to our second whiskey now, which is, of course, the Michter's #1 Unblended American whiskey. Now, there's some really interesting things about this whiskey. First of all, these are questions which I'm sure Andrea is about to answer for us. What on earth is an unblended whiskey? And also, what makes this American whiskey as opposed to bourbon? So I'm fascinated to learn more. Andrea, can you tell us about this whiskey, please?
Sure. So first of all, maybe I'll talk a little bit just about Michter's and then come back to what makes it unblended and sort of the reasoning behind all of that. So Michter's is a brand that actually has a heritage that sits in a different state. It started in Pennsylvania in 1753. It was started by a gentleman, John Schenck, who later sold to Abraham Baumberger. And then it closed during U.S. Prohibition, that fateful time in our history where we couldn't sell alcohol. And then reopened in 1934 after Prohibition. And then it was picked up in the 50s by a gentleman, Lou Foreman, who actually renamed the brand after his 2 sons, Michael and Peter. And it was the merger of their 2 names that made the name Michter's. Michter's, sadly, though, in Pennsylvania closed in 1989. And the family that acquired the abandoned trademark did so in the 90s because they used to distribute the brand. They had a fondness for it, and they really wanted to resurrect the brand. And so it was 3 brothers that owned the brand. We're privately held. We have no external investors. And the 3 brothers, one of them was being mentored by a gentleman, Richard Dick Newman, who here in Kentucky knew a thing or two about making whiskey because he used to run a couple of big distilleries, as well as he ultimately became president and CEO of Wild Turkey Distillery, which is now, owned by Campari. And so he was mentoring Joe and said, well, look, one piece of advice I can give you is if you're going to resurrect this brand, you should do so in Kentucky, because you want to surround yourself with people who understand the whiskey business. And it's not just great distillers and people who understand maturing, but it is a highly taxed and regulated industry. So you should surround yourself with people who can help you be successful. So the family decided that they would resurrect the brand in Kentucky. So after the acquisition of the trademark, they began kind of 3 stages of operation. And the first stage was to go around the landscape of Kentucky, taste through some old barrels, buy some old barrels from, other great Kentucky distillers of a flavor and style that they would like Michter's to be for the future. So they did that and they began bottling. Second phase, they said, okay, well, in order to be sustainable here, we're going to have a distillery, but we can't afford to do that right now. We don't have the financial resources to do that. So let's go to a great Kentucky distillery and see if we can forge a contract for them to produce our recipe for us. So did that. And then later came on with, we have a beautiful facility here in the Shively section of Louisville, Kentucky, which if any of you all ever visit, we have a facility in downtown Louisville as well that houses our old pot stills from Pennsylvania. So that's our second distillery operation. And so that facility is where our Pennsylvania stills are, pot operation there. Very different than the column still operation that we have here in our Shively operation. These facilities are only about 10 minutes apart, but it's all of our stills are all copper. They were all made by Vendome Copper and Brass, which is a locally family-owned still business that has been around since 1903 and builds stills for all over the world as well. And so we're very fortunate to have them as a partner in our equipment. All of our equipment is made by Vendome Copper and Brass. And so we have, we purchased this building in 2012. It was an old auto parts facility that went upside down. The building was left vacant. We acquired it, began retrofitting it with processing and bottling, and then installed our stills in 2014, brought them online in August of 2015, and then have been distilling all the Michters in this location ever since. And so a big part of our activities have been keeping that transitional consistency of the liquid. So we were fortunate when we were distilling in phase 2, we had all of our new make samples. And so we were able to bring these stills online and dial them into to make them as close to, if not better than the previous new make that we were making in our second phase. So that there's a lot of talented team members here who've worked to help us keep that continuity of liquid over the years. And so now we've grown into 3 campuses. So we spoke a little bit about the Fort Nelson Distillery in downtown Louisville, which also has a beautiful bar on the 2nd floor. It's a world-class cocktail experience that's been curated by Dave Wondrich and our local bar team. And then we also have this beautiful farm that Becky mentioned in Springfield, Kentucky, which is maybe about an hour and 15 minutes from our plant here. And that location, we're growing estate grown grains and we have some warehouses, and it's also serving as part of our future campus and continued growth of our operations. So I say all of that to bring us to the American whiskey. So we focus on making Kentucky bourbon, Kentucky rye, but we also make this unblended American whiskey. And the way we make this whiskey is we actually take the distillate and we put it in 2 different types of barrels. We put it in our new toasted and charred barrels, All of our wood has been naturally seasoned and air dried for at least 18 months. We toast the barrels, then we char them, then we put the distillate in. But we also take some of the distillate and we put it in some of our own used bourbon barrels. And we age them, and then we bring them back together. And that's what creates the product. That's the process. Now, the reason why it's very confusing, because it seems like maybe it's blended because we're bringing these two casks back together. But under the laws of the United States, as it relates to the production of whiskey, if you do not conform to the rules of bourbon, because bourbon requires you to use a new charred cask, if you do not do that, then you're not in that category. So same thing with rye, same thing with wheat or any other grain you use. If you're not meeting the definition under the law, then you sort of fall into this blended whiskey category. And the blended whiskey category in the US really only requires you to be 20% whiskey in the bottle. The other 80% can be grain neutral spirit, it can be color, it can be flavor, it can be anything you want it to be. And we did not want to be associated with that category because the only thing we're doing here is using some of our used wood to produce this product. And so it seemed like a penalty for us to be associated with that. So we actually petitioned the government for the opportunity to use the term unblended. So we are the only unblended American whiskey on the market that I'm aware of. And the whiskey itself is quite beautiful. It's got this nice golden, darker golden hue to it, but it's got this beautiful sweet note on the nose. I think I don't know, it's a lot of vanilla. It's got some nice butterscotch. It's got some fruit associated with it, but it's also got this confectionery experience for me that, like, if I was thinking about walking into a bakery and, they're making croissants and they're also spreading buttercream icing on a cake. And it just, the experience of walking into a bakery is what it reminds me of. So I'm just going to have a bit of a taste.
So interesting, Andrea.
And Susan, I'm so sorry that you're not tasting as well, because I was so enchanted by you talking about the Benromach. I was like, oh, she's making me want some and I don't have any.
Same. I'm going to go out and find some. I'm going to go buy some once I'm going to go online and buy a bottle. I'm fascinated by the background in the story there. You had me enthralled.
It's a really interesting story about how you've created this, and also very strange that in the US, even having something which can't be called a bourbon, so therefore it's not, what would be classed as a blended American whiskey. It just doesn't make sense. So I understand completely that but to go out and create a category on your own, you're the only ones doing this, is mind blowing. But what I thought would be really interesting, the reason why I wanted to include this in the tasting, is because you've used those used bourbon casks to mature it. It has less of that wood character, which I think is what some people have really picked up on as well. Which I think sometimes, particularly for British palates, can overwhelm the whiskey, the spirit character itself. Was that a consideration for you when creating this whiskey? Is that something that you wanted to achieve?
Yeah, so that was the goal. The goal of this whiskey is 41.7 proof, and it's a whiskey that can be enjoyed by anyone. Like, it's soft, it's lovely, it's smooth, it's got some nice fruit, it's got some nice sweetness. and it's just very enjoyable. So that makes it very approachable, but it also has, nice texture. It has, sort of a nice finish. It's a great sipping whiskey, but it's very versatile too. You can use it in you mentioned a highball earlier. You could use it in a highball. You could use it in a classic cocktail if you wanted to, just to drive a little more sweetness to maybe what's otherwise a more whiskey forward, like a Manhattan or something like that. But it's a very versatile product. I think the use of the used bourbon barrel, does two things. It allows us to continue to take advantage of all of the work that we've done to prepare this wood. So the natural seasoning and the air drying and the toasting allow us to get rid of some of the bitter, astringent green characters that we don't want in the wood, but it also allows us to access some of those sweeter characters that we do want, some of the other notes that we do want from the wood as well. And then when you move to, utilizing it the second time, now we've got actually bourbon that's trapped in that cask that has all of that goodness in it as well. So you're going to get to take advantage the second time around of some of that bourbon that was originally aging in there. So that also contributes to it. But you're absolutely right. You're not getting the oakiness at all. And, I think one of the signatures of Michter's, as it also relates to the wood note, is just the low entry proof, because we do enter into wood at 51.5 ABV, which is much lower than the industry would allow. The allowable entry is 62.5 to be a bourbon or a rye. We enter all of our whiskeys here into wood at 51.5. So it basically means we're about 75% whiskey in the barrel, but we're 25% water. That water has the advantage now of being in the cask through the whole process. Water is a powerful hydrolyzer. So all of those wood sugars are going to dissolve easier, and you get to take advantage of that. So all of these things are working together to reduce tannin content, or, that sort of astringent bitter character that you're not necessarily looking for in the spirit. So it's just lovely. It's very approachable. When I have friends over that maybe they're not the biggest whiskey drinkers, this is the one that I always pull out for them. And they're like, oh, this is so good. I didn't realize I liked whiskey. I'm like, yeah, there you go, So
absolutely. I would say it's a crowd pleaser. I mean, everybody seems to be loving this one as well. Andrea, I don't know whether you can see all the comments, but everyone is absolutely enjoying this. Even people who say they're not massive fans of bourbon, I assume because of that big woody character that bourbon often has, but they're absolutely loving this. Lots of comments about cocktails and how to enjoy this. So comments about having it in an old fashioned or an espresso martini. Do you know, I'm a big advocate for putting whiskey in an espresso martini rather than vodka. I think it really complements the coffee, cocoa kind of notes in that cocktail much better than vodka ever would. But also on your tasting note cards as well, just at the bottom you have got little cocktail ideas too. So bear these in mind. At the moment, you can probably Google those two if you're not aware of them. And on the Benromach, we've also got, now one of them is one that I created for a TV show, Love Your Weekend, recently. But for the Benromach, there's the Scotch Bramble or the Flying Scotsman with a cherry on top. We will be widening the website very soon, so that all of these cocktail recipes will be on the website, so you'll be able to go back and have a look. So once you've obviously bought all of these bottles, then you can use some of the whiskey to create these cocktails, so they will be on the website as well. But I do love a peach smash in particular, and I think this would go particularly well with those Andrew, you were saying about like walking into a patisserie, like those brioche kind of notes that you're getting in this whiskey, I think would really come alive in a peach smash and make it feel a bit like an apricot, a pastry style flavour. So I think that would work wonderfully. Really would. A few other questions that have come in as well, particularly around the mash bill. Are you able to divulge what kind of mash bill you're using for this? And is that the same for the bourbon? Does it change?
Everybody always wants to know our recipes. We actually don't disclose our recipes, but I will tell you that it's more of a bourbon style. We'll just say that.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of corn. There's a lot of corn in there.
Nice. Listen, if anyone's got any more questions for Andrea and Susan, then do shout, do let us know. We've got another 15 minutes or so to chat through these whiskies and really uncover them. I'm really pleased you're all enjoying them too. It's always a bit of a shot in the dark when I choose the whiskies to put in these packs, and I try to pick things that maybe you haven't tried before, but will also be affordable and ones that you will definitely enjoy too, but also have a really interesting story. So hopefully you can all agree these are two whiskies that hit all of those spots. I'm really hoping. Thank you so much, Chris. No, I wouldn't have. Actually, do you know what? I haven't gone back to the Benromach, having tried the Michters. I'm quite glad.
That right there is what I was wondering, though, because the way that Susan described the whiskey and the way, you know, I feel like the American whiskey taste, I do feel like this was probably a very good pairing, even though, you know, a lot of times you don't think about doing a Scotch and an American whiskey in the same tasting. It does sound like these are very comparable. So it's interesting to get that feedback.
They do. There's a really lovely fruitiness in both of them. I'm just sorry that both of you are just drinking your own whiskies. Susan, I did just have a message from Michter's. We're going to get you a bottle sent out.
Oh, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Well, we can't have you not enjoying it or going off and getting one on your own. And Andrea, I'm sure we can get one out to you as well.
No, that would be great. That would be great.
And then you can try them
on our side to get.
Wow.
Let me see if I can do anything on my side, Andrea, to get a bottle to you. We do distribute in the US, so I'll see. Let me see if I can work some magic.
Oh, do you know what? I love this. I love these kinds of tastings. It's sort of really bringing people together. We were just saying earlier before we came on the live how nice it is that we've got the three of us in completely different places, and then obviously all of our wonderful viewers chiming in from all over the place too. And do you know what? I see all those familiar names, but I actually don't know where everyone is from. Maybe everyone tell us where they're from as well. I'd love to know. While you do that, I do have one question for you, Susan. I don't know whether you know very much about it, but obviously Benromach is owned by Gordon and MacPhail, which is a legendary independent bottler. And G&M are also building another distillery in Granton-on-Sea.
Yes, it's called the Cairn. It is producing. The production side has been completed and handed over, so we are producing our first single malt from the Cairn. The visitor side is still in progress, so we are hoping to have the visitor centre open towards the end of the year. We're not sure on dates as yet, but yeah, very exciting. It's just outside Grantham, completely different animal to Benromach, whereas we're small and traditional and handcrafted. The Cairn is much larger and it is fully automated. It's, for example, our mash tun is 1.5 tons. The Cairn mash tun is 5.5 tons. So it's a much larger scale. I haven't been lucky enough to try any of the spirit that's coming through yet, but I believe it is very tasty. But more to come on that score, I think, in the future. That's about all I know, really. But
do you know what style of spirit they're going to create?
I'm not sure. They're still doing some. Obviously, the copper takes a little while to settle in, so they do have spirit character in mind. But I haven't been privy to those discussions, so I'm not quite sure what the spirit character is going to be. So they're working on it. Our distillery manager is a lady called Mary, and she has worked in a number of different distilleries across the years as well. So she's had experience at William Grant's and at Edrington and at Glenglassaugh. So she's very experienced in her field. So she's leading the team up there. So exciting times ahead.
Very exciting. Love it. I love as well that there's another woman running a distillery as well at the helm. That's what we want to see. Lots of us running whiskey, trying to change those stereotypes one at a time. Andrea, what's on the horizon for Michter's? Do you have any other plans that are coming up?
Oh, yeah. Well, so we just, this year, we moved to a 5-day, 24-hour operation, and we came online. We had 8 fermenters. Now we have 10. And then we are, by the end of the year, we will be on a 7-day, 24-hour operation. So thank you all, Michter's drinkers everywhere, allowing us to continue to expand. So that's great. And, we're just continuing to grow and do more things. We've got 2 more warehouses under construction right now that are actually just coming to completion. So we're very excited about that. And so we just continue to grow and keep talking about Michter's and doing things with you, Becky, and whoever we can talk about whiskey with, we love to do it.
Always. And listen as well, for everyone watching, if you ever find yourself in Louisville, obviously you have to get down to the Fort Nelson distillery. It is on Whiskey Road, so the main street in Louisville that has so much whiskey heritage. It is right on Whiskey Road. So make sure you get to the distillery, have a tour. It's brilliant, absolutely brilliant. And then go and have a cocktail in their bar upstairs because, as Andrea mentioned, David Wondrick, who is an amazing cocktail historian and author, he's created the cocktail menu up there, and it is phenomenal. I'm telling you, I'm talking from experience because I have been. We've had a cocktail in that bar, and it was amazing. So, have to get yourself there, definitely. Okay, so there's another question that's come in. Oh, by the way, thank you everyone for saying where you're from. I really appreciate this. We've had people come in from West Cumbria. Sarah Rose is from New Zealand originally, but based in Manchester. We've got someone from Florida, now lives in Scotland. Brilliant, Anne. Love that we've managed to tick both boxes for you. Aberdeenshire, West Cumbria as well. Tabitha says, you know where I live, Becky. She lives around the corner from me. And I have dropped off whiskey for her as well. So I do know exactly where you live. So stay on my good side. Actually, there's a nice question here from Tabby. What would either of you say is your favourite whiskey that is not your own? Ooh. Susan, I'll ask you first.
Well, I have to be fairly biased and say Glenrothes because my dad made it. And I'm from Rothes. But my top 3 would probably be Glenrothes, Talisker, and Springbank.
Good choices. I love the Talisker Distillers Edition. It's always a cracker, that one. Yeah, big fan of that. Good choices. Andrea?
It's hard. That is so hard for me because, and I've had people ask me this, and I'm just going to stay true to my answer, and nobody's going to like my answer, but I have so many friends in this industry, and this is the honest to goodness truth, is that I have friends every Kentucky bourbon distillery. I have friends in Scotch distilling. And to say, on a show that is televised everywhere, who ranks at the top would be like a death card for me. So I am not going to do that. But I do think that, there are so many. I think, Susan, you were talking a little bit earlier just about the team and the people. And I think what resonates for me is I always end up loving the whiskeys where you meet the people who have such passion behind making them, because to me, passion equals great whiskey. That is what I have seen time and time again. And so I think that's what I would have to say on the topic. I know that's not what people want to hear, but certainly I had a career with Diageo. Diageo made a lot of beautiful scotches, a lot of beautiful whiskeys, Canadian whiskeys, US whiskeys, all kinds of whiskeys. And so, you know, I enjoyed a lot of different spirits over the world, but I think that that's kind of where I'm at with it. I can't say. I just can't hurt my friends that way.
I know how you feel. You know, it's funny because I get asked that question all the time as well. What's your favorite whiskey? People get bored of the you saying, "Oh, I can't possibly name one."
That's what I said.
If you were to ask me that question tomorrow, I would have a different 3. So, you know,
it changes. It changes. It depends on my mood, who I'm with, everything. But my answer now is, what's my favorite whiskey? It's the one you're buying me. That's my favorite whiskey.
That's good. I like it. I'm going to steal that with pride.
Enjoy. Listen, it's been absolutely wonderful having this tasting with you both, Susan and Andrea. You've been such a pleasure. Thank you so much. And I hope everyone at home has enjoyed watching, listening along, tasting along as well with the whiskies too. So that brings us to the end of another tasting. Thank you both so much for joining us. We will get whiskies out to you. Don't worry. We'll enjoy the love. And I hope to see everyone again next month. So again, our live tastings are on the last Thursday of the month. So I think it's something like the 25th of August. Don't take that date seriously. It's the last Thursday of the month. That's when we'll be doing our next tasting. We'll have another 2 amazing whiskies lined up for you. I can't wait for it. Please tell your friends to subscribe. Tell everyone you know to join up with OurWhisky. You can buy a gift for your mate if you like as well. You can get 1 month, 3 months, 6, a year, however much you can afford, and help us share the love of whiskey. But thank you everyone for watching along and for joining us. Really appreciate it. Have a lovely evening. And oh, by the way, if anyone's into TikTok, I'm going live on TikTok in about 15 minutes. So if you want to join along, have a bit more whiskey love, then come and join me. But just for now, thank you very much. Good night. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.